All right, you've seen me take 60 to 66 long beds and make them short. You've seen me do the same thing with a 73 to 87. Today I've got a 67 to 72. Now why do we have so many videos on how to cut down your bed sides? Because the wildly popular kit we have that takes your long bed frame and shortens it to a short bed frame. So you guys at home, the do-it-yourselfer guys, we want to help you out and give you the information not only on how to cut down your frames, but how to cut down your bedsides too. Now we sell these brand new, but we know some of you guys do this at home and you're going to need a little assistance at that. That's why we're here. You stay tuned, you hear? So the only complicated piece of equipment you're going to need really is a welder. After that, not that big of a deal. You've got patch panel clamps. I'm sure you've seen my videos in the past on how to use these. If you haven't, this basically just puts your patch panels together. We've got an angle grinder. We'll need some miscellaneous measuring and angle things, markers, tape. I'll show you what these guys do later. So it's not really a lot of equipment or anything like that. So first thing I like to do is just kind of check out my bedside. I'll see if there's any damage to it, and I like to fix the damage first, even if it isn't in the area that I'll be cutting, because sometimes a dent or something can warp or whatever and cause a problem. Now this bedside really is a bit beat up, but we got it for free, so it was a good price. And it is going to make my job a bit more difficult today, but we're going to find out how difficult it is in just a bit. I'm going to knock these dents out best I can, set up my welder and some miscellaneous other things, so stay tuned and I'll be right back, okay? All right, so there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, and there's different people doing this different ways. This is just a particular way that I like to do it because I find that it's the easiest way and it gives me a really good result. So what we're going to be doing is taking 12 inches out of the front and 8 inches out of the back. Now I don't like to take out my tape measure and measure all the time, so what I'll do is just simply cut a flat stock 12 inches and then I can use it for a nice consistent 12 inches. I'll do the same thing with 8 inches for the rear. Now what we'll be doing in the front right here is we can eliminate this gas tank filler neck hole right here, and what we'll be doing is coming about 1/4 of an inch off this edge right here. Then we can go ahead and take our 12 inches, put it up against our measurement, and we'll measure here and tape and stuff like I'm going to show you in just a minute. Just give me a basics to start off with. So that'll be our 12 inches right here. And the top right here we'll be doing kind of a step over thing for the stake pocket. Again, I'll show you that in just a second. Now in the rear we'll take our 8 inches out right around this neighborhood here. Now there's different ways of doing it where you can eliminate the side marker, but we're going to be keeping our side marker. Where we're going to be cutting this is relatively close to this edge right here. Whenever you take metal and you bend it, it strengthens it up. In large flat open areas like this, when you start doing metal work, it tends to warp and such. So by cutting it right here, we'll be able to take advantage of this rigidity right here, and it'll keep our bedside from warping in too much or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is just start at one side at a time, and that's the way I recommend for you to do it at home too. Don't cut up the front and cut up the back and try to do both at the same time. Get the cut the front or the back, get it set up, then go to the other side, then you'll be able to finish it off. So I'm going to go back to the front and we'll get that set up. All right, so what we're going to do is be going about 1/4 of an inch from this edge right here. So you can just use something like this, and it's going to scribe that line out nice and consistent. Then what I'll do is I'll take some blue tape right here. That doesn't have to be blue. But you do want to get one that's about 1.5 inches or 2 inches wide. The reason being is that the wider it is, the more stable it is. So what happens is when I'm trying to get a nice straight line out of this, then the wider the tape is, the easier it is to keep the line straight. So I'll get this laid out right here like this. And I'm just going to bring this edge over. We're going to do some fancy stuff down here in a minute. I'm going to flip this around and I'll show you that. But I just want to show you the rest of this up front first. So once we've got this tape laid out and it's stuck down good, take your magic marker and actually make lines where you're going to be cutting. Because sometimes when you get all your tape laid out and everything, it gets a little bit confusing. And if you were to cut something on the wrong side, then you're going to cause yourself a lot of problems. So I'm going to do that right there just to make sure that I've got my cutting line good. And then I'll take my flat stock right here that I've cut out at 12 inches and I can just simply lay this down and mark every inch or so. So let me get this all marked out and laid out, and then I'll show you what comes next. Got all my lines marked out. Now when I'm laying down the tape, what I like to do is lay down the tape so that it looks like this one as far as the angle, the marks here for cutting. I want to keep as much consistency as possible so I don't have things left side, right side, upside down. It makes it just easier if you got a nice consistent thing. So in other words, I'll lay this guy down, get it all down here and looking good. Okay. So, with the tape on this side, I can draw my arrows, and you can see my arrows are going the same way. We're cutting the tape on the same side. And it's not like you got to do it, it's just these little things help make it easier to keep track of everything and not get confused. Another reason I like to do that like that is because when I'm cutting it off with my angle grinder, then I'm able to see my line really well. And when I put on my wheel, I'll take the colorful side and put it on the inside. It's nice to have just the black on the outside because when you have all the colors spinning and stuff, it makes it a little bit more difficult to see and cut a straighter line. All right. So we're actually going to be keeping this stake pocket right here. We're just going to take the whole thing and just move it over a little bit. And we got to do kind of a step. And I'll show you what that means here in just a bit to make more sense. But what we're going to do is we're going to get this guy and we're going to dial it in at about right there. This is probably about 1 inch and 3/4 or so. It doesn't have to be totally exact, it just needs to be basically right about here on the edge. And what we're going to be doing is just simply marking this edge right here, and that's the line we'll be cutting in order to do the step over. This will make a little bit more sense when I get a little bit further down the line. Now we'll be figuring out where we're cutting off on the inside. It doesn't have to be in exactly the same spot that you're cutting from the outside. As long as you take the 12 inches out of anywhere in here, you'll be able to move it on over and weld it back up. So I'm going to take my, what I'm going to do just for ease is I'm just using my 8-inch flat stock right here. That is for the rear. I'm just buttoning it up against this edge right here, starting at the top where just underneath the stake pocket, and then I'll bring this down and get these lines drawn here. I'll lay the tape on this, then I'll measure my 12 inches with this, lay down some more tape. So just give me a minute here and I'll get that all set up. I've got my lines in the back marked. I got my tape on there and everything, and I brought my lines over the top right here. And here you can see what I'm talking about on the step. So we're going to be cutting up like this, then we'll cut on over, and then we'll cut right here. So what we need to do is just duplicate that, which is what we've got going right here. And in order to duplicate that, all you really need to do is just simply take your 12 inches, you got your line right here, I simply put this right here, that's where I know how far to step it over. So now that we've got this all mapped out, we can go ahead and double check everything, and then we can go ahead and start cutting off. Now, a lot of times what I like to do is not have any of my tape hang over. I like to have it nice, clean, and concise, so it's not, I don't get confused in the neighborhood here. But you can see this is going to get cut off, and then it's just going to move on over. So let me go ahead and get this set up, and we'll cut it. So I'm getting ready to cut, and again, you might wonder why we're going so close to the edge right here, because really we could take 12 inches out of anywhere in here, but the closest we are to this edge right here, the more rigidity we get. If I was to cut 12 inches out of here somewhere, then it's not as stable, and we could get a heat sink in our metal and it would kind of bow in there. Now when we're cutting this out, along the edge right here, you have to be careful not to bury the blade too far and cut through the other side. So you'll just want to cut through the thickness of the metal, and that'll make it a little bit harder to keep it straight. So you'll just have to put one hand on the bedside, and then you're able to have a nice stable cut. You don't want to have your hands and arms up in the air or rested against your body, because you don't have as much control. Get contact with the metal, and then it'll be easier. When you're cutting out this section right here though, there's not any braces or metal that you have to worry about underneath. So when I'm cutting these, I'll bury the blade a bit deeper, and the reason is that the deeper the blade is, the easier it is to go straight, because the blade is kind of assisting you in that. So let me go ahead and cut this out, and we will see what we got going on, huh? When I'm going to cut this last piece off, you got to make sure that this end is on the table. If it's not, it'll start falling off, and it'll bow and it'll twist the metal and stuff. So get it secure all the way across the board before you cut this last piece out. Okay. So that's what that looks like when it's all done. Now you might want to ask yourself, why don't I cut off the larger piece and then cut off the smaller pieces off of this? And it's because when it's all together, it's easier, it's more stable and stuff. So cut off your smaller piece first, then we'll go ahead and double check all of our measurements. So when you're cutting, even with the tape and everything, it's pretty easy to like wave off to a side or so, but it's not a big deal, because even if I cut this line crooked, way crooked like that, all I'd have to do is make an exact 12 inches out, and it would go back together and we'd be okay. Obviously you want to cut it as straight as possible, but if you do get a little bit off, it's not the end of the world. All we got to do is double check. All right, so I'm going to take my 12-inch flat stock. All I got to do is put it right to the edge of my cut, and then double check everything. And I can see that I did get it just a little bit off. So no big deal. We just take our tape back off. We'll make some new marks, and we'll put some new tape down, and then we'll have an accurate cut. I'm going to do this to the front side too, and then I'll start slicing that up, so don't go anywhere. All right, so a lot of times when you're cutting, get right in that little corner, there'll be a little bit of tab left over. So sometimes you'll just want to move it back and forth a little bit until that tab breaks. But here you can see the what we cut off. 12 inches out of the front, 12 inches out of the back. Now let's see if it'll go back together. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to by hand put this up here and see how things are looking, see if I've got any anything I need to trim, and you normally will, like right up here where I was saying the corner doesn't cut that easy. I got a little extra there. I'll need to trim that off. I'll flip this over and I'll trial fit it up there, and I'll do it, you know, 1, 2, 3 times just to make sure everything's copacetic and don't have any big gaps or anything like that. After I get that all set up, in order to get a good weld, you need clean metal. So I'm going to grind off about 1/4 of an inch on both sides, the bedside here and the end right here. I'll grind it on the inside and the outside as much as I can so I get the cleanest weld possible, because if we get a quick clean weld, we got less heat. Heat, of course, is our enemy, and it's going to warp our metal, so every little trick we can help. So let me just clean all this up, do a little bit of trial fit and get it clean and cool, and then I'll show you what comes next in 2 and 2. So I've done a little bit of trimming, and I've got everything to fit up nice and neat. So now we'll go ahead and start putting it together with our patch clamps. And I like to start on the inside. The outside, you really can't get patch panel clamps on that well because of the edge. And so what I'm going to do is start here at the top and get that started, and then I'll work my way down here. So all you got to do is just loosen up the patch panel clamp. You put in the little square piece right into the hole of it, and then tighten it down. Now I'm not tightening it down real tight. I got to have a little bit of movement room so that I can jostle things around and get them in the perfect spot. So just give me a little bit to get all of this set up, and I'll show you what it looks like in just a second here. So I've got all of this here with my patch panel clamps, and I've just got them pretty snug. So you can see I've got a little bit of a gap there. We'll just nudge everybody up, and then we'll tighten it up a little bit more, and we'll just keep massaging it into place. We're going to be taking a straight edge, and we'll be double checking here, and we'll be double checking here, and then that's about it really. I guess we check here too. All right, so everything's looking pretty good. Now, if you get this far and you see you got something else that's got to get grinded down or whatever, then, you know, take the time at that point, because once you start getting welding, then everything gets locked into place. So all of your problems get locked into place. So as soon as you see anything that looks off, go ahead and stop right then and there and fix it, and then go back to it. Trust me, you're going to be happier that way. I'm going to tighten everything down a little bit more. Double check we're all snugged up. All right, looking pretty good. So now we'll go ahead and start doing some welding. Let me give you a couple of welding tips. Now I'll start tack welding this up, and when I do, I'll start at the top and I'll work my way down. So I have to make sure my top is absolutely perfect and then go down. Now the reason we're starting at the top and working our way down, we don't do one tack weld at the top and one tack weld at the bottom, because if we did have our metal kind of bunched up, then we would trap that little bunch in. But if we start at one end and we had it kind of warpy, by the time we get to the end, it'll straighten on out. I think you can see pretty good right here, right? Okay, so let me show you how. A lot of times if you just take your welder and you just hit the button, zzz, you're just gonna melt right through the metal, okay? So what you're gonna wanna do is get a little bit of a BB started. You're just gonna do one quick little zot, maybe 2 or 3 little zots, and you just get a nice little BB. Then you can hit the welder for a longer time, zzz, and you can meld that BB down into the metal. If it's closer together, you gotta do less of that. If it's further apart, you gotta do more. So it goes a little something like this. Okay, see how we got that BB there? Now I'll melt that right in. All right, so now that I've shown you that, I'll go ahead and weld this up, get it nice and stable. I'll take out my patch panel clamps, we'll flip it over, and we'll do the other side. All right, so here you can see we've only got tack welds about every 3 inches or so, and the reason being is that we want to keep our heat down, but we still have to have this secure enough so we can flip it around and do the welds on the other side. Just let this be for right now, and then we'll flip it over and do the other side. Again, heat is your nemesis, so we got to always watch out for heat. All right, so on this side here, I don't actually use any patch panel clamps. I suppose I probably could take the end of one of those little squares and round it out or bevel it so that it fit in there good, but I haven't found the need to do that really, because this piece here is so beefed up and secure because it's got that round edge. So all I'll do is I'll get some screwdrivers and then I'll just help me keep things in place. I can use a smaller one here, and this will, I can spread things, move them up and down, that kind of things. So you'll always notice that I don't wear gloves. I don't like wearing gloves. If you do this for a living and you wear gloves, then your hands get soft and they get cut easier when you're just doing simple things. I like to beef my hands up and get them calloused. So, and again, I can feel my metal when I don't have gloves on. So I'll feel my metal and I'll get everything lined up good. When I like it, then I'll go ahead and get a tack weld on there. I'm just going to continue this down again every 3 inches or so, and then I'll stop and I'll let this be. Then we're going to go ahead and start on the back. All right, now you might ask yourself, why don't I just finish this off while I'm here? And the reason is because of heat and the damage it's going to do to your metal. You're going to have to get something else to do. If you are as impatient as I am, then you're going to weld too much and you're going to warp your metal. So you just get this secured to this point, then you cut off the back end, you get it secured to the same point. Now I'll be able to go a couple of welds here, then I'll be able to switch to the other side, do a couple of welds there. By the time I get back to this, it'll be cool, and I'll just keep switching back and forth, front and back, and this will keep our heat down and keep our problems down. So let's go see what we're going to do in the back here. So right now I want you to notice how this line right here, it does a bit of a slant downwards. It's not straight. So because of that, we can't cut this straight because we'll end up with an odd little gap right in here. In order to compensate for that, what we're going to do is cut it at a diagonal, and then it'll be easier to blend in the 2 edges. So in order to keep this beveled edge right here accurate, what we're going to do is do a little bit of measuring. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to start in this flat spot right here. We don't want to be down in the curvature. And what I'm doing is I'm coming down about 2 3/4 of an inch. So we're going to cut about 8 inches right out of this neighborhood here. So I'll just take this and mark it like this. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to mark this right here, part of the panel, and we also want to have it in the flat spot. If you get it in the corners, it makes it a little bit more difficult. So the measurement for this is going to be about, let's see, that's looking at about 6.5 inches. Now you might feel inclined to do a little bit more, a little bit less. None of this stuff is written in stone. Like I said, there's a lot of different ways to do things. Ooh, that got a little crazy there, didn't it? All right, let's try that again. All right, now I'm just going to lay my tape down as nice as I can. Again, I'm going about 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch from that edge right there. So that's looking pretty straight, 1/4 of an inch or so, coming on down. Ooh. Like that. Sometimes on the bottom right here, because of the curvature and such, the tape will go off on one side or another, but that's looking pretty nice. So now that I have this set here and we've got those lines set, then I can go ahead and take a few more measurements. And what we're going to be doing is simply coming over 4 inches on this top right here. And then we know where from this point to this point and that's where we're going to be cutting. So I'm going to take a razor and I'll cut off all this extenuous stuff so that I don't get confused and such. And then I'm going to make me some quick marks here too before I forget. And then all we have to do is take our 8-inch flat stock, we'll make all our marks coming all the way up. When we get to right here, we'll simply make a mark right here. We'll come up to this line, we'll make our mark right here, and then we know when we come up to this, I'll lay this tape out too first, and then after I get that set up, then I'll go ahead and come back with this. So I'm going to get this all looking pretty and stuff, and I'll be right back, okay? All right, just got to tell you one last thing before I make it all pretty. So at this point right here, that one little spot you made, you're going to want to take your angle, put it right up on there, and draw a nice straight line. Then I'll take my razor and I'll cut it right on that line. And I'll get everything set on top here first, then we'll flip it over and we'll do all the taping on the back side. Now that this line is established, I can take the square I have here and then continue this line right over the edge. Put some tape on there. Make my cut line mark. Now I can finish off the rest here. So again, we're just taking our 8-inch flat stock, mark every few inches. Then I'll put my tape down and do the same thing right on up here. All right, so remember the mark that we made right here and the mark that we made right here, which is simply 8 inches there and 8 inches there. Now we'll go ahead and take a small thing of tape and we'll get a line drawn between those two. Okay, let's take a look and see what we're going to do on the inside. Next, I'll go ahead and take this piece right here. We'll get it right on our edge there. And then I'll be able to continue this line down to the inside. All right, so next I can take my square here and I can put it right up on there and I can draw a line out like this. Another thing I can do is simply measure from my flat edge here and then carry that line down. So either way you use, just make sure you get this line nice and straight. After you have that nice and straight, then you can simply get your 8-inch piece and copy that on up. So I'll be back in 2 and 2. All right, it's cutting time, so be careful. Okay, so again, make sure that you've got support for the end right here. You start cutting and it's hanging over, it's going to slop. Or did you catch that mistake? Extra points if you did. I did not double check with my 8-inch flat stock right here. So I'm gonna stop and double check, and it looks like the cut that I've got is good and the rest is good. So I'll finish this off, then I'll double check my inside before I cut it. Remember, double checking is always a good thing to do. All right, you see this right here? You got to make sure that this is off it'll fold underneath and you have to like pry it up and make sure it's all off of there. If you leave this on, these rough edges, then it won't let your patch panel clamp get on there exactly right, and the metal will be a little bit off. So get all of that slag off of there. So I've ground off all of my burrs. I grinded down a little bit of the paint so I get a good weld, and I've trial fitted this up a few times to make sure that I like the way it looks. Everything's looking reasonably reasonable. So now I'll go ahead and get my patch panel clamps and put it all back together again. Now this bedside had been beat up a little bit, it had some dents in it and such. So you want to try to take those out as much as possible before you get to this step. So this might cause us a little trouble, so we're going to find out though. So again, start at the top and then work your way down, then I'll flip it over and I'll do the other half. Okay, so I'm done with all my clamps. I like to use something like this because after a while your thumbs really start to hurt. Also, I'll use a rubber mallet, tap things up, make sure everything's looking good that way. We've got our square. We're going to make sure we're flat across this way, we're flat this way. Now this looks a little bit wonky maybe on the camera or not. It got hit in the back right here, kind of bowed it up. That's kind of tucking this down, and we've got some damage down here. We had a little bit of damage up here. So what I'm going to be doing is starting on the outside. The outside is your money shot. Let's say I got my inside just a little bit off. It's not going to be that noticeable, but the outside is, because it is on the outside. So what I'm going to be doing is starting from the top, and then I'm going to be working this groove right here in. And you don't want to get a tack weld on the top and a tack weld on the bottom and then try to work it, because if there's any idiosyncrasies in here, they're going to get trapped into the middle. But if I've got anything uneven and I start from the top, the unevenness will work its way down to the end. Now right here, I don't know if it's showing up or not, but we've got some damage right here. I'll show you how to take care of that when we get a little bit further down the line. And you can see that this doesn't line up either, and I don't have any clamps on it. I'll be getting to that a little bit further down the line too. Just for right now, we'll be starting at our top and working our way down. Before I do each tack, I feel it with my fingers. If I need to bring one side up or not, I'll just use a little screwdriver and gently pry. If you're having to do anything more than gently pry, you're going to have to double check and see what you got going on, because you probably got something wrong. So I went through my tack welds twice and I got this pretty secure. I'm going to go ahead and take off my clamps right here. I still have all my clamps on the inside, and I'll be leaving the clamps on the bottom right here. Whenever you've got uneven areas, like this right here, what you want to do is just get all of your metal secure first. So once this is secure, then I can hammer and dolly on this and it'll stay in place. If you try to do it too soon, then the metal's just loose and it'll just bounce around on you. So what I'm going to be doing is taking these off, and then I'll see what I'm going to do about this down here. I think I'll probably go ahead and flip this over and get my tack welds on the inside. I can get to the back side of this right down here, so I'll be able to hammer and dolly on that when it's the other way, and it'll make it a little bit easier. So let me get all that set up and I'll be right back. Okay, so we're just double checking things again. Make sure we're pretty good to go. Looks reasonably reasonable. So now I'll do the same thing. I'll start my tack welds at the top and I'll work my way back. Now I don't know if this shows up on the camera or not, but when I cut this, I got a little willy-nilly on it and the gaps are a little bit wide on this. So it's not that big of a deal. Whenever you get a gap that wide, all you're going to do is just simply hit it with shorter little bursts of the weld. Zot, 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 until you build a little bridge over here. And what we're going to be doing is we want to go about every 3 or 4 inches, and then we'll take these off, and then they'll start going back and forth. Again, heat is your nemesis in this deal. If you get it all hot, it's gonna warp and it's gonna look bad. So we have to have something else to keep us busy. So that's why we're gonna go back and forth. So I'm gonna get this tacked up, and then I'll see what I do next. I don't know. My inside's secure, my outside at the top is secure, so now I can go ahead and work my way down. So I'll just use a hammer and dolly and such, and get my panels here lined up nice. And then whenever you get something like this, if you get something off, you see that it's not quite right, go ahead and stop right then. Don't keep going, because you'll kind of cement in whatever problem you've got going. So just take your time, get the little nitpicky things looking right, and you're going to be better off in the long run. Now that we're secure right here, we can go ahead and work on this end here that doesn't quite line up. So it's not really that tough. I just kind of bend this in a bit and bring this out a little bit. Then you can see how easy that was. I'll do a little hammer and dolly. I'll get my patch panel clamps on it too, and get it as nice and flat as possible. So let me get this all welded up, and then I'll show you how to trim it down so it looks all nice and even. So I'll just put a straight edge. This is all nice and firmed up, so I just put a straight edge right up on that edge there and bring it out. Just go ahead and cut that off, grind it down a little bit. Now what we're going to be doing is doing our final welds and getting everything all kind of like a nice decorative, clean, cool look. Because a lot of times it looks good to leave your work shown. In other words, we're not going to do body work and paint this. It's kind of a style now to leave it raw. So I'm going to show you how to leave it raw, but leave it looking good too. All right, in order to keep everything nice and clean and neat, what we're just going to do is put some tape, just about 1/4 of an inch on either side of the weld here. Then when we're grinding and stuff, hopefully we won't go over and we won't end up with a bunch of willy-nilly scratches everywhere. We'll just have one nice, neat seam that looks cool. When you're doing this, again, heat is your problem, so you're going to be bouncing back and forth. When I grind off the welds, what I'll be doing is simply get a few welds like this and then go ahead and grind them off. Don't weld, and then grind, because it's too much heat. A couple of spot welds, let it cool down, grind it down. Now, when I'm grinding it down, I like to use a 36 grit or a 40 grit and just gently grind these down. Once I get them all nice and flat, then I'll switch to like an 80 grit, and then I'll switch to something like this to finish it off and have it all look really nice. So I'm just going to finish off a little section right here so you can see it looking done and nice and neat, so you don't have to wait for me to finish this entire bedside. So let me get that all done, and we'll show you what it really looks like when you're all cool. All right, so whether you're going to be leaving this raw as a badge of honor or you're going to be doing body work, it's really a good idea to take it this far anyway, because if you have harsh 40 grit scratches in there or anything like that, they can phantom up on you later. So get rid of all of those. Now again, we do sell these bedsides brand new. You don't have to do any of this work. You just call us up, order it, and you're already done. Bolting things on and bolting things off is relatively easy. This takes a little bit of chutzpah. So maybe gather up some chutzpah and cut up some stuff. My name's David Francis Bonhoeft Welch. I'm here to save every single truck on this planet. I need your help though, so I need you to join me every single Tuesday so you can learn as much as possible, and together we will save them all.